And we are back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation discussion about Star Trek. Currently, still focused on Star Trek: The Next Generation. We're in season 5, and we are in episode 3. Wait, yeah, 7. Ensign Ro. We're on Ensign Ro.
How can you be confused on the 3rd episode of the season?
Because I watched 2 in a row, and so it was a little confusing.
Okay, fine. I did too, but I mean, okay.
Yes. I'm happy to be joined by Sean from Trek on the Tube. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
All right, so I'm assuming I'm doing the summary.
What's the other one? Ensign Ro, and the other one is Silicon Avatar.
Silicon Avatar, yeah.
I'll do Silicon Avatar.
All right, deal. I'm holding you to it. All right, so let me go to my notes here real quick on Ensign Ro. I also watched an episode of Deep Space Nine in anticipation of a drunk Space Nine recording coming up this week.
Ooh.
So yeah.
I will be watching Space Seed and then Wrath of Khan soon, because I have a French discussion coming up about that.
Oh wow.
But that'll be, I don't know.
Like a recorded discussion in français?
Yes, en français. It's an interesting concept actually. They've got they do 50% Trekkies on their podcast and 50% noobs. So people that have never seen Star Trek. And so they have a different concept every time they watch, for example, all of the pilots, or they're going to watch Star Trek 09. So this time they're watching Space Seed and the Wrath of Khan. And so you get the comments by the people that have never seen Star Trek in their lives before. And then you get the old school Trekkies that will talk about it. And yeah, it's pretty interesting.
That's pretty awesome. And where does that, you might as well promote it.
Promote it?
Yeah, where can people go? I mean, I have only 5 people that watch this show, so.
Well, I mean, okay, so
but if any of them
it's entirely in French. It's entirely in French, but yes. So Star Trek pour les nuls, which is essentially like Star Trek for dummies, is the YouTube channel and the Twitter, and like they only have like 5 episodes in, 5 discussions in. It's relatively new. They just started it, so. Super. And I am a special guest coming up, so. Well, I mean, it has to be done, but.
Excellent. We can start having a French segment on Starfleet Boy. You can. No,
Frère Jacques.
I don't know if this is it can't just be you, Sean, but something's going on in Montreal, because Japan used to be my largest downloader on the podcast side, and now Montreal's catching up. It's like a huge, like I think I've shown you how my map works, right? Like it's these big bubbles that show you like where what cities are downloading. Yeah, so Montreal is I'll show it to you after the show, but Montreal. So for other than Sean, Jamie, and Simon, if there's anyone else listening in Montreal, welcome to our audience, and we'd love to hear from you.
I was going to say it's the William Shatner fan club, but then this is Next Generation, isn't it? So
wait, the William Shatner fan club is based in Montreal?
Okay, well, I would assume so, considering, I mean, he's from Montreal, isn't he?
I knew he went to McGill, but
maybe not. They might be based in Los Angeles, actually.
Well, I know that he is Canadian and that he went to McGill, but I don't know if he was if he's French Canadian.
Well, if you've seen Better Late Than Never.
No, I haven't seen
it. He dabbles in French. Like it's all right. He's not fluently French, but you know, you kind of get the gist of what he's saying based on the words that he's trying to pronounce. So
Je m'appelle Bill Shatner,
Yeah, that's a pretty good impression of William Shatner speaking French.
You m'appelle. It would probably be more like Je m'appelle William Shatner.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad.
All right, so Ensign Ro, we have a weird kind of opening with a admiral who has the common cold, or actually Cardassian virus, probably. So he's sneezing through the opening with this very serious thing where we get introduced to the Bajora, which is what they were called here before they were called the Bajorans. So the Bajora.
Yeah, some interesting research to share about that, but I think you probably have the same.
I didn't actually have time to do research, so I'm excited that you did do some research. That's good. I only have questions. I only have questions today. I don't have answers, so maybe you have some of the answers, which is good. Anyways, so the Admiral lets Picard know of a situation that's going on the border of Cardassian Federation space, where there's a group of terrorists that are attacking Cardassian colonists. And so apparently what happened is that when the treaty between the Federation and the Cardassians happened, sometimes there were some settlements that were Bajoran, or Bajora, sorry. We're going to call them Bajora until later on when they're known as Bajorans. But anyways, some of the settlements that were Bajoran but on the Cardassian side ended up on the Cardassian side, and some settlements that were Cardassian ended up on the Federation side. So everyone's kind of screwed and pissed off and uncomfortable. And apparently now the Bajorans are launching terror attacks against the Cardassians. So the Cardassians are really pissed about it, and they want the Federation's help to find the terrorist leader and bring him to justice. So Admiral, what's his name? Kenaway, I think, tasks Picard with finding a peaceful and diplomatic solution to the problem. And then he forces Captain Picard to work with the mutineer Michael Burnham, who was involved in the killing of many Starfleet officers. Oh, did I say Michael Burnham? I'm sorry, I meant Ensign Ro. Very similar template for these two characters. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but anyways, he tasks. What's that?
No,
you don't agree. Oh, good. We'll have a debate.
She reminded me of someone else, someone from The Expanse, but.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, good. This will be fun. Anyways, he tasks him to work with Ensign Ro, who Picard is like extremely appalled about. What? I will not work with that filth. Do not bring this shit aboard my ship.
I think you're putting words in his mouth there.
He didn't say that exactly, but it was like the tone was pretty nasty, I thought. And so was Riker. Riker was like pretty pissed about it too. Anyways, Ensign Ro comes aboard, and she's immediately controversial, and no one seems to really like want to give her the benefit of the doubt, except for Guinan, who reaches out to her, even though Ensign Ro is very thwarting of her welcoming. She manages to get through to Ensign Ro, and this kindness leads to more introspection on her behalf. And so we then find out that, anyways, Ensign Ro helps the crew to find someone who can lead them to the terrorist leader. And then she actually goes rogue, and Ensign Rogue. She actually goes rogue a little bit and beams down and talks to the leader ahead of time. And then when Picard finds out and goes down to talk to him, it's revealed that there's something deeper going on, and that Picard's at the center of it, because there's no way that this guy could have launched the terrorist attacks that the Cardassians are claiming. Their ships don't even have warp capability, and they definitely don't have the kind of equipment necessary to do any of the things that were done. So Picard's a little baffled, and then Ensign Ro meets with Guinan again, and they have a little heart-to-heart, and then she's grounded by Picard because he's pretty pissed that he went behind his back. She went behind his back. So then Guinan comes in and kind of plays mother to Captain Picard's father, and forces him to talk to her. And that's when Ensign Ro reveals that the Admiral has actually been double playing him. And so while Picard and crew have been trying to negotiate a peaceful resolution, Ensign Ro was ordered to offer guns in exchange for a truce or whatever. And so very reminiscent of the kind of shenanigans that the United States got into in the 80s and probably still gets into with the Iran-Contra affair and other such type situations in history. Anyways, Picard's really pissed and decides to spring the trap, as it were. So he to see what the admiral is going to do. So they take one of the Bajora vessels and they're escorting it to this peace treaty conference thing. And the two Cardassian Gala class starships intercept and basically say that get out of our way. We want to destroy this ship. They've caused so much trouble on our side or whatever. So Picard calls home to see what to do, and the admiral basically orders him to withdraw and agrees with the Cardassians. That's when Picard knows for sure what's up and accuses the admiral of shenanigans. And when shenanigans,
how dare you?
And so the Enterprise backs off, and the Cardassians destroy an empty ship. And when the admiral's a little baffled at everything, and Picard explains to him, "You dummy, they don't even have warp technology." And and he's like, "How can this be?" And he's like, "Maybe the Cardassians found someone naive like yourself," which was a very nice way of saying you're a dumbass. Anyways, so that's it. That's the end of the episode.
Shenanigans.
Oh, sorry. There's a little epilogue where Ensign Ro, who's been in prison this whole time at the stockade, I forget where the planet was, but anyways, she's been in prison all this time, and so Picard, who is impressed ultimately by her roundabout way of being actually very Starfleet, offers her a position just like Lorca does to Burnham on the Enterprise, except it's all condensed into one episode, which makes me it could have been condensed into one episode. Anyways, he offers Ensign Ro a spot on the ship, and Ensign Ro accepts as long as she can wear her Bajoran earrings. And so they have a little laugh, ha 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 ha, and that's it. That's all she wrote. How was that summary?
That was good.
Yeah,
that was good.
I was
there's
happy
there's a lot going on in this episode.
There certainly is, and now we get to chew it all up and digest it.
So what do we start with?
I guess if we just go by the notes, I wrote, the first thing I wrote is that this episode references the season opener, because when he's having his haircut with Mr. Mott, who, by the way, this is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first appearance of the barber, Mr. Mott, who gives strategic.
Haven't we already? Oh no, we've seen another Bolian barber.
We saw another Bolian, but it wasn't Mr. Mott. This is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is Mr. Mott's first. We'll go to Memory Alpha and read the facts afterwards. It's always fun to see where we were wrong and what my memory is like. But anyways, in that opener, he references, he's like, oh, so, he's referencing something with the Romulans. So you decided, so you fell for their trap or something like that. And he's like, I told to do this. And then he also, when Captain Picard gets called to the bridge about the Cardassian situation, Mr. Mott kind of to himself goes, I told them never to colonize near Cardassian space or something like that. It's like, so I thought that was kind of funny. And then that joke extends to that thing extends to the bridge, because Picard brings up to Riker, like, oh, I see you've been speaking to our Bolian barber. He's like, he's the best barber in Starfleet.
Yeah, so I have a problem with that. He's the best barber in Starfleet, or he's the best barber that works for Starfleet? Because does that mean he's enlisted?
No, I don't think Riker meant it like.
Yeah, okay. It was just yeah.
It was a slip. He probably should have said the Federation, but he might be a non-commissioned paid personnel though aboard a ship, because I think well, I think it's odd that you need a barber in the at all. Like I would think that you could just kind of put like a helmet over your head and it zaps your hair,
See, for
you know, or
humans
whatever.
maybe because we have I would assume pretty simple hair. But I mean, there's other races and other species out there that might have some funky stuff going on up there. So that, you know, there might
This
not
is a
be a
good point,
machine
yeah.
for them. But then again, like he's kind of ironic because he's a Bolian barber, isn't he? Um,
No hair. Well, you know,
like, do these guys even have hair on their planet? Because every
I
Bolian we ever
mean,
see is they're bald, but you know.
as a person who doesn't have hair atop his head, I think it's been well known to longtime Starfleet Boy fans that I wear a wig, but but my mother's a beautician, and I thought for a while to go into hair cutting because I thought, well, I could at least give other people joy.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not because you don't have any that other people don't. So I agree.
Right. And at the end of the day, I sadly pick up all the hair on the floor and just put it atop.
Oh my god!
Just
Is that what Mr. Mott does at the end of the day? No, he like plasmas it or lasers it off your face. Just like
um,
burns it off your
but yeah,
head.
it is interesting that they brought in this extra character. I think the show's getting richer, if you will, with kind of like these
Mm.
guest appearances and things like that. And I did like that they referenced the season opener. And I thought about this, and I thought you might appreciate this because you are a aspiring or actively trying to be a screenwriter. And we talk a lot about how much. I mean, I am 100% in agreement that The Expanse is the bee's knees. It's like it is the show to watch right now, and I'm really impressed with the structure of the writing and everything like that. And I noticed something. It's like I do remember that like episodes weren't necessarily aired in the order that they were filmed. And I think around now, season 5, they start doing something clever because in this episode, they also foreshadow the season closer later on with something that Guinan says to Ensign Ro. I don't know if you caught that. Um, but what I think is clever is that like this episode may have been meant to be right after a lot, you know, like right after the opener. So they put these references in, but as long as you kind of put it in close to the opener, like it doesn't matter because the references vague. So structurally, it's neat that they're trying to build this like continuation or this arc a little bit, you know, as best as they can
Mm.
within the confines of a syndicated television format, you know. So I
Yeah,
thought that
well,
was pretty cool.
they have this kind of old school episodic format, but you can see that they're really trying to have some connective tissue linking all the episodes together.
That's a
It's
great
not a
way to
hard
describe it.
not a hard reset on every episode. I mean, the ship always seems to go back to normal. Everyone, you know, everyone's saved and everyone's doing this and doing that. But everyone's, you know, got their jobs back and whatever changes were made are brought back to how it was before. But they are trying to link things together. And
Yeah, I agree.
and these kind of characters, Mott being one of the first ones, I think Guinan can be considered another. These kind of civilian characters that they have on the ship are a really good way to do that. Really good idea. In season 7, you even get another bartender, which isn't Guinan. Don't know if you remember him, but he's playing poker with like in lower decks. He's
In Lower Decks, he's like
playing
introduced.
poker with
That's
the
right.
junior officers, but then he's also playing poker with the senior officers, and so
He was a cool character. Yeah, it was a really neat character. That's right. I forgot about him. Great memory on that. The reference that Guinan makes is when she's trying to get Ensign Ro to trust Captain Picard. She says that a long time ago, I was in really big trouble, and I would still be in that trouble if it weren't for one man. And I think that's a reference to Time's Arrow because it's finally explained later that Picard's connection to Guinan is so deep is because he met her in her past as well.
oh my
So
god.
what happened?
No, it's because I've been doing my full rewatch of TNG kind of ahead of you. So I'm well 2 seasons ahead of this. So I go back and rewatch these just for the episodes.
Gotcha.
So Time's Arrow for me is in the past. But yes, you're right. Time's Arrow is the season finale of this season. So I didn't even. So when you said the reference, I was like, what is he talking about? Like I'm trying to think ahead, but then I'm thinking ahead of where I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Ahead of where we are now. Okay, so I'm
There you go.
I'm
So those
confused.
were
I'm confused by my own timeline.
Oh, get yourself together, man. Get off my bridge.
That's actually really awesome.
Yeah, I was really impressed by that. So, yeah, audience, I'd be curious if you think that I'm just imagining things or if that's really there. I think it's really there.
So the question is, did they just drop this line, and then later on they said, "Hey, we should do something with that," or do you think they already had like Time's Arrow in the works at some point, and so they thought, "Hey, this episode's probably going to happen at some point, so might as well, you know,
If
foreshadow."
I had to guess, it's just so specific, a thing that she like drops that mention. So if I had to guess, they probably were like, I bet they do the anchors. Like they're like these major episodes are the ones that they figure out first, right? Like what maybe the mid-season and then the closer for the season, and then they're like, hey, writers, sprinkle these throughout, you know, here and there for foreshadowing purposes or
So
whatever.
you think they already had like season finale is going to be like a time travel episode, and we're going to go back into the past, and then Guinan's going to be there, and she's going to save the day. And so they thought we could probably reference that at some point. That would if that was how it happened, it's fucking awesome.
That is awesome. And I think also the reference is vague enough that even if they change their plan, it wouldn't matter. You'd just be like, oh, who's she talking? What's she talking about? You know, it's like,
come on.
So yeah, those were some of the things that I really liked about that whole thing. What about you? What any you want to go back and forth on notes, or do you want me to just go through my list first?
We can go back and forth. We can do whatever suits you.
So another note that I have, we'll just if you think of something, just say it. Let's just
go through your notes and then power through it. I'll follow you. And if I've got something to add, I will.
Something that I wrote down, which was kind of funny to me, was I never noticed that when Picard is talking to the Admiral, he offers his Aunt Adele's ginger tea to help soothe the Admiral. And, you know, obviously this is not the case because she didn't exist back then, but it'd be funny if his Aunt Adele is like not someone alive like right then, but like a reference to like, you know how when you have an ancestor and you would still refer to them as like Aunt Adele because she's like the aunt of your family or whatever, right? Yeah. How funny would it be if Adele the singer is his Aunt Adele? So I thought that was funny.
Okay, that's just your headcanon, you know, doing all the work.
No, 100% headcanon, but I'm just saying like that'd be a really funny thing if
Adele... I did notice that the Admiral didn't seem too convinced by like a ginger tea.
The Admiral in general, I thought was like very weird and creepy and almost too positive. Like he was just like, he was like, hey.
Okay, so this ties in well into one of the problems I have with this episode, which isn't so much a problem. It's just TNG is renowned to having admirals as the bad guys.
Yeah.
Every time there's an admiral that's going to appear on TNG, the bad guy. We're at season 5 now. I mean,
there's more.
It's not even a surprise. We watched this. We've already seen TNG. This is, you know, however many is 30 years after it came out. So we know that the Admiral's a bad guy. But I'm sure that even on first viewing that night when it came out on television, so many Star Trek fans that have been following TNG, you know, every episode since season 1, they knew that he was the dick. They knew that he was the guy that was going to screw something over.
He did smell of bad guy from the beginning,
and then his overwhelming, I don't know, it was like
persona, right?
It was like it wasn't really a positivity, but it was more I don't know,
like a sales.
He was fishy. He was trying too hard to not be bad. It was just.
Ultimately, I think that the character is meant to be gray in that sense, because I do think that like he does seem genuinely surprised at the end by the revelation, and so I think Picard nails it when he's like, oh, you know, well, what they found was like an idiot. Basically, it's not that necessarily he's a bad guy, but he's an idiot. Like he's like straight up, he fell for a trap by the Cardassians when he should have seen right through it.
Yeah, well, it seems to me like he's not one of the most
the brightest bulbs.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. And so the Cardassians took advantage of that. Cardassians being very intelligent. So
I had a question for you that I wrote down, which is back in the day, the Bajoran and Cardiff was situations, which some of these situations are still going on. I don't think it was highlighting any specific situation in the world, but in general, like, situations like what's happening, especially on Deep Space Nine, the Bajorans to me they kind of represent Tibet and the whole situation in Tibet. Like, so the Cardassians and the Bajorans seem to me like a parallel of what's happening between China and Tibet, and what's been going on there. And I think that I remember at the time, like, that, that was something that like was in the social consciousness. But I think it's a timeless kind of they probably take the Bajoran and Cardassian conflict and apply it to a lot of different things, including the obvious like Nazis and Jews, world, type of archetype there.
That's where I usually take it.
Yeah, it's very much so like that when you dive deep into the way Cardassians seem to be, and like, there's a lot of war crimes and things like that that they talk about on Deep Space Nine.
I'm sure everyone can find differences and ways to say that the Nazis are not like the Cardassians, or the Chinese are not like the Cardassians, but in theme, it is very much the same. You have like a kind of overpowering force that's taking advantage of another species, and yeah.
But something that I also thought about was how the Bajorans, Picard makes reference during this episode to how when humans were barely even standing, Bajoran poets and artists and architects were like doing extraordinary things. So it's established that the Bajoran civilization is very old, and as a matter of fact, so is the Cardassian civilization. They're kind of like, interestingly enough, they kind of grew up together, but Cardassians went like this one way, and then the Bajorans went the other way. And if I'm not mistaken, discovered that they have like there is a connection between Cardassians and Bajorans, like as far as like ancestrally they may have originated from the same
well, I'm going to assume they all come from the same they're not the founders, but they
the preserver or whatever whatever they're called,
ancients, whatever they were called.
Yeah.
That being said, it's interesting that Cardassia it's pretty much an empire because it's huge. They have like this whole part of space that is theirs, whereas Bajorans, they just have one planet. Of course, because Bajorans are all about the culture and the art, architecture, that kind of stuff. So they probably didn't have any ambition to go and conquer.
Right, and and actually they've one planet, but the Bajoran system is theirs for sure. Like
yeah, of course. So, yeah, I say planet, but I mean system.
Yeah,
I just don't know how many planets there are, habitable in that system.
That's a good question. We might be able to look that up before the end of the episode. But go on.
Yeah.
Oh, so what I was asking is, do you see any other parallels like that kind of hit you on the head, or is there like a modern current like conflict that this episode seems relevant for still today?
I don't know. I tend to always so generally speaking, when we talk about Cardassia and Bajor, we always have Deep Space Nine going on in our head. So I always have a tendency to take that Jews and Nazis, because Bajor is all about the spirituality and the religion, and so Jews the same thing. But I'm not sure it's specifically any event or any situation. I think it's just it's a good way to show a war or an arc or anything that you want to do.
It is interesting that like I do find it interesting that like terrorism is a huge social issue on the planet these days, and how like it's interesting that we do meet a terrorist leader in this, and he's like, I actually thought he was Orta, I think his name is, or something like that. I thought his
Oh,
costuming was very
yes.
cool, and like the whole, audio augmentation, because his vocal cords were ripped out in one in a torture, like
Hmm.
basically, or whatever.
That's actually something that I think excuses the admiral in the sense, like, so the admiral is just the classic, bad guy admiral from TNG. But I think what excuses that is well, first of all, they wanted to focus on Ensign Ro a lot, so they developed her character and gave her a lot of lines. But they also took the time to kind of create these characters, like that guy. What was he called? Um, the terrorist leader.
Oh, Orta, I think. Let me
Yeah.
look him. I
So
wrote it down.
they took the time to kind of, I mean, he was a very interesting character. He had depth, though we only see him very few times.
Yeah, it is Orta. And yeah, you're right. We definitely only see him a few times, but yeah, I thought actually we never see him again. You have a little factoid about this episode that ties into Deep Space Nine. I don't know if you want to give that now that you tip me on.
I forget his name. Dolak.
Dolak.
Gul Dolak. So the keen-eyed viewers will note that Gul Dolak, the Cardassian kind of, what is he? The first Cardassian Gul that we see in the beginning of this episode. He
Oh no, it's
appears.
he's the goal. Is he at the beginning? Because I thought he's actually the one when they're gonna attack the
No, yeah, you're right.
Bajoran.
He's the
Yeah,
one. He's the one that wants to attack the Bajoran. What is it? The Bajoran well, decoy essentially.
right, the decoy.
Okay, so he is heavily featured in Deep Space Nine, but not as a recurring character, as a wanted poster in Odo's office.
Right.
So they got his name there, and they got his face, and they just stuck him on a wanted poster in the security office.
That's pretty funny. The Bajoran system has 14 planets, and
Oh wow,
Bajor is number 7 in the system, I think. Hold on.
wow.
Let me see here.
Actually, I don't think they talk about this much in Deep Space Nine, because this episode establishes that Bajorans during the occupation and because of the war and all of that have spread out across the galaxy, and they're kind of setting them up as refugees
And
or
nomads, yeah.
immigrants, that kind of stuff. Whereas that pretty much changes, I think, once we get to Deep Space Nine.
Well, there's a massive kind of homecoming because part of the win of Terok Nor, the part of the win of all of this like conflict that kind of diplomatic stuff that's starting now with Ensign Ro will eventually lead into Deep Space Nine. And I think if I remember correctly, the whole thing about it was that like right now Bajor is still occupied by the Cardassians, and so like throughout this whole Ensign Ro arc and this Bajor arc on TNG, when we get to DS9, it's because Bajor has finally been relinquished back to the Bajoran.
That's why Cisco was sent to Terok Nor.
Right, to facilitate the
To take
handover
it
and
past
to
Deep Space
the
Nine.
provisional government, and like to kind of help the Federation is just helping Bajor get back on its feet, the Bajorans get back on their feet. So that's the whole thing, is that you're right. At this point, they're still refugees, but it's like they get their home back, which is kind of awesome if you think about it.
So it does make more sense to me if there's 14 planets in that system, that they were spread out across the galaxy and everyone came back to the Bajoran system, rather than having everyone across the galaxy come back to one planet.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm sure a lot of people stayed wherever they are, but
of course. So then it makes even more sense with this. So okay, so they refer to the Bajorans as the Bajora in this episode, which in actual canon there's pretty much no mention of this. It's just kind of, I think, assumed that they were talking about the Bajorans, but they just used a different word. The same way sometimes we talk about the Klingon language as Klingon, or as Klingonese, or as Klingon-y. Memory Beta, however, which isn't canon, but is kind of it's beta canon, establishes the Bajora were an ethnic subgroup of the Bajoran species.
Oh, that's interesting. Much like maybe like similar to how we look at gypsies, perhaps.
If there's multiple planets, maybe like there's a Bajora that have their own kind of government going on a different planet, and they're kind of detached from the Bajoran government, and which have like the main planets or whatever. I mean, that could make sense.
Interesting. Where did I see that thing about Bajor? Bajor, by the way, is the largest planet. There's 14 planets, with Bajor being the largest, is what Memory Alpha says about the Bajoran system. And then let me see here. Where did I read that? Oh, well, I can't find it now. But it's really interesting. Let's see here. In the 16th century, the Bajorans explored the system using light ships. That's a cool episode of Deep Space Nine also. If I click on Bajor, it'll probably tell me everything I need to know.
So this episode is okay. I don't think it's the best in its execution, but it does have a tough job of setting up a lot of things. Because so not only is it showing us a new character, it's also diving deeper into the relationship between the Cardassians and the Bajorans. I think you're right at this point. They're kind of trying to maybe set up Deep Space Nine. If Deep Space Nine was already in the talks.
I definitely think so. And I vaguely recall that Ensign Ro, played by Michelle Forbes, by the way, who's fabulous. She also plays a great character on the Battlestar Galactica reimagining that you haven't watched yet. She plays Admiral Kane on that show. And she's like very like prolific. I've seen her in so many things. Like I think she might have been on what's that show about the vampires and the werewolves? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I've got Twilight in my mind, but
no, TV show. Maybe she's not on it, but I was imagining that she was on well, she's on The Walking Dead, it says here. I think you watched that show.
Yeah. Really?
She's on Battlestar Galactica.
Wow. Okay. I didn't when?
Here, I'll tell you right now. It says Walking Dead. She's on Missing Persons Part 1 and 2, and then the Yarzite Part 1 and 2. She plays a character named Sarah.
Okay.
She was in the Chronicles of Riddick, the video game. She's just like all over. I think she also goes to conventions. So if you ever go to a convention, you have a chance to meet her. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe Gary may have met her. He seems to have met everyone.
He does. He's one of those guys that seems to, I don't know, he seems to have like a picture signed by everyone, or he's met everyone. He's got a conversation. He even does interviews. So
I know, and I think it's great. Maybe it's just because he's centrally located in London, which seems to be a place where a lot of that action.
He's so much more outgoing than I am. I would never dare do any of that. He just goes for it. So.
So yeah, she was on. She's gonna be on 9 episodes of Star, and he was supposed to go on to DS9 to play Kira's character. She was
that's the thing. The moment you see her, after watching Deep Space Nine, when you come back to TNG, you kind of feel like, okay, this was a setup for Kira. This was supposed to be the Bajoran officer that you were gonna have on Deep Space Nine. So I don't know why they didn't go with that.
I think she just had better things to do, or maybe they can negotiate a contract with her. I'm glad though, because I actually love Nana Visitor Visitor's portrayal of Kira Nerys, and I think that's pretty cool. So yeah,
I think it was more interesting for them also to have a Starfleet commander paired with a Bajoran officer rather than another Starfleet officer.
who happens to be
If it's
Bajoran, right?
yeah, because then you get this whole thing where Kira, like she's not active as a terrorist, but she's still got ties to the underground, etc.
Yeah, she's
So I
a
think
very complex and interesting character too.
she's very annoying as it stands. I've seen I'm rewatching Deep Space Nine. I'm at season 2, and at this point, she's just kind of an annoying character.
But but you could definitely see that the two characters are so similar in many ways.
They are
I think Ensign Ro is a little more like, angry, perhaps, and tough, around the edges. But
then it makes sense that characters would be very similar. I mean, I expect that a lot of Bajorans would kind of be like them. It's maybe especially the younger ones. I think like the older Bajorans might still have the kind of core, how should I say, the values, or their core beliefs, which is they would live, with art and culture, etc. Except these young Bajorans are more just enraged about the situation that they had to live through, and so a lot of them are kind of angry and
many of them were
spiteful
freedom fighters, and so I can only imagine that they're also very like shell-shocked or bitter, and just it's a mess. I like it though, because like it's interesting.
Yeah,
it's so it's interesting.
It turns the Bajorans into a very I don't know, they're very patriotic in a way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense, like considering what they've been through.
Yeah.
I thought you said earlier that this episode has a lot. It's really dense, but I thought like there are things that kind of like stick out now that I had just kind of like forgotten. But like the whole way that Bajorans' names are like constructed, I didn't realize. I knew about it from Deep Space Nine, but I didn't realize that was established here in TNG when they're like Ensign Laren, and she's like, no, it's Ensign Ro. Bajorans use their family name before their Kira Nerys, and so she's actually Nerys, and they call her Nerys all the time, and so it's interesting like how that was established here, and I totally had forgotten about that. I love the scene. I love just the scenes where, because you get used to like kind of the crew of the Enterprise being like this awesome teamwork and everything like that, and so the very first scene in Picard's ready room, she's basically like, she's like, well, this is better than prison, and Riker loses his shit when she says that. Like,
Riker is so mad throughout the entire episode. He's really not happy with the situation.
He's not happy with the situation.
Because then she leaves before like she leaves.
She just gets up and she's like, all right. She's like, I'm out. I know how this goes. Deuces, right? And then Picard's like, oh, just
Picard says, he says dismissed after she's gone, and Riker's got these mad eyes, like, oh my god.
He's like insane. Like he's just, I've never seen him really like that. Actually, I thought the acting was really good in terms of like a little over the top, perhaps, but in just the right way.
It's nice to see that, because you have a tendency to think everyone is kind of like flawless in TNG, and it's true, they are all flawless, because they like, not only are they like Federation and Starfleet, so they represent humanity, or they represent the Federation, but these guys are top Starfleet as well. Everyone on the Enterprise is literally the best.
Flagship.
Yeah, they're the best they can be of each of their species, right?
Right.
But then, since we only see them all the time, you kind of forget about that. But it's good to kind of put that into perspective and show the contrast once you bring in this rebellious kind of asshole.
She's actually an asshole. She's totally an asshole.
So there are certain things that are justified, but the way she delivers it, like the way she explains the whole thing about Ro Laren and the name to Picard, I mean, you don't have to put that much sass in the way you explain it. Dude doesn't know.
But then but then another great scene with more of that is the ready room sequence. I mean, sorry, the conference room sequence where she's kind of rolling her eyes in the background when they're what was the Crusher's talking about they're trying to make contact with Orta the terrorist. So the first thing is Dr. Crusher kind of mentions this guy named Jazz Holza, which I wrote the name down like because it was such a weird name. It's like Jazz Holza, right? So she says that she's seen him at like symposiums or whatever, which I think it's just funny how they're always going to like a lecture or a symposium.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean by contrast. It's like these guys doing everything everything's so sophisticated. They listen to opera. People playing the cello, and I mean, in Discovery we get like a frat party. And at first,
we get a frat party.
Oh my god, what's this going like? My initial thoughts, but that's not Star Trek.
You totally glitched out on
then
that.
You think
last
about
thing.
it, like, yeah. Well, I mean, a ship is a big place. On the Enterprise, you would assume that, yeah. So this got my back.
All right, so you glitched out on like your last like 3 sentences. So I'll know what you said when I listen to the audio.
I was just repeating, "Am I back?" Yeah, no. It makes sense that because the top brass on the Enterprise, it makes sense that they go to sophisticated things, but then, of course, there's frat parties going on in the Enterprise as well. I would assume for the younger.
Okay, you might want to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You might want to check if that download restarted. But
no. I put it on hold, so
okay,
it'll be fine.
Anyways, but what I liked about that scene is she's kind of rolling her eyes or whatever in the background, and then Riker's like, something wrong, Ensign Ro. And then she just basically says that like that guy that Crusher recommended is like a total idiot, and like he has no real contacts. And then she mentions that the real guy you want to talk to is this guy Keeve Falor. And then that's then we at first she's like but they had to pry it out of her. Like Picard's like, okay, Ensign Ro, I understand that it's not the right person, but then do you have a recommendation for who? And then she's like, oh, this guy Keeve Falor. And I thought that was interesting. Like also in that scene when he comes down to the planet and meets Keeve Falor, I thought it was interesting because that guy is kind of like a bitter governor, if you will. Like he's trying to make the best of the situation. But Picard says, in that scene where he talks about how the Bajorans were doing all these extraordinary things when humans were still not even, standing. He says, in my 5th grade reader, like I'll just casual, like he learned about it. It's like what everyone learns about in 5th grade, and I thought that was a pretty funny thing.
But then you don't learn about the way their names are structured,
right? You just no, we just learn about the basics in my 5th grade reader.
maybe it's like general history of this, the portion of space or whatever.
Yeah, it's probably true. But I get so my next I seem to like write a lot of
Return of the Chair Vest, by the way.
Yes, the chair vest was the anti-sex tunic, aka the chair vest is featured prominently, and I think it's in the next episode and the episode after that. I think it's here to stay. I can't remember, but he does lose it at some point. Like
it fizzles out at some point.
It does fizzle out. Maybe it's just this season because of all the tough things he has to go. He has to go down on the planet a lot. It's like
it's the dark and gritty TNG. So he puts on his vest. He puts on his.
But carrying on from a previous conversation, it is Picard that goes down to do the negotiating and to talk to. These are potentially dangerous situations, and it's him who's going down there. And this time, he's going down there by choice. Like he feels like he's the guy that's got to do it.
I feel like there's a kind of one part of him thinking, I need to do this because, I want to do this myself. But there's another part of him thinking, I can't send Riker down there with Ro. This is not going to work
Oh,
out.
because Riker's insane. Like Riker's gonna just
Riker's just mad.
he's gonna like get into like a fist fight with her or something like that.
Absolutely. Because
I
he's
see what
just
you mean.
he's mad at Ensign Ro. I don't know. He just seems like aggravated at that point in time. So he's probably just thinking, I'm not going to send this huge tough guy down there to start a fight with every Bajoran on the planet. Because
Riker has no patience for Ensign Ro at all.
For all you know, they all have this kind of attitude that Ro Laren has, and you don't want to put him in a situation where there's like 20 people, 20 rows around him.
I think even Ensign Ro is like a little more extra than most Bajorans might be.
Well, the same way Worf is a little more extra when it comes to
it's true. It's true. So I think we should talk about the like the Burnham thing. I know it's probably just a coincidence because it's but I don't know. I just saw a lot of similarities, and I wondered if the writers or if Brian Fuller, I guess, would be the credit to creating Burnham. Maybe, I'm not sure. We don't know all the behind the scenes yet, but I don't know. I just kind of like couldn't help but wonder. It's like, obviously Ro didn't start a full scale war, and wasn't responsible for mutiny. And well, I don't know. We don't know. All we know is that she's in the stockade because some crew members got killed in a mission. Did you catch the whole thing behind that? Because I kind of
not really
vague.
Well, it wasn't too clear to me. I'm pretty sure it wasn't something like a mutiny.
No, I don't know.
It was just, I think, some reckless decision making or something like that got her a court martial and put her in prison. But so she wasn't in prison enough to like have her stay there. Admiral what's his face was up to some shady business.
But that's what I'm saying is like
Lorca it wasn't bad enough.
Lorca kind of parallels that in a sense because he like kind of recruits Burnham into this shady business, so I just think that
I think it's a coincidence though. It is a nice way to do things, having like a redeem arc where someone's done something very bad and so like they kind of redeem themselves by saving the day, or it's I think it's a common trope.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the whole thing of someone shady getting you out of prison, or I mean that's very common as well. So I do think it is. It's funny that it kind of mirrors that though.
Yeah, and I just wonder if subconsciously, because they are Star Trek fans, the writers, we assume, and also Joe Menosky is involved, and we can see he's very heavily involved in this season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So I don't know if that like may have kind of on a very like. Obviously, like I said, this is condensed. It's like a Burnham-esque story condensed into one episode. Whereas, we get Burnham, we actually get like a whole season arc and stuff like that. And I have to say that like my favorite things about Star Trek Discovery are centered around Burnham's fall from grace and redemption. I could have done without like a lot of the Klingon stuff and like, but I liked
that's what drags the season down, but
whatever. I did like her story, her personal journey. I thought that like the love arc maybe was a little too much, but definitely I did feel satisfaction when she's reinstated into Starfleet at the end of the season. So that was like a kind of a nice thing there.
Perfect tie-in. It's very nice that Ensign Ro has that short discussion with Picard where he says, "What are you gonna do?" And then he invites her on the ship and talks about potential, talks about how they can kind of harness. What is it? I forget how he says it, but he says something. He's very honest and very straightforward in the sense that he says like a lot of my best officers have this kind of thing, and he really says
rebellious.
Yeah, but he says you're not one of them yet. He says you're not a good officer yet, right? But you can be there. You can become it. And I like the way he's diplomatic, but he also tells you the truth. He's not going to tell you like you're an awesome officer. You just need to show it. No, he says you're not an awesome officer yet, but you can become it.
100% agreed. I did like that also, and I think It's a good story. One thing also of note is I forget who she's telling this story to. It might have been to Picard, but that was really horrific, and it kind of like really like shook me. Was how she kind of like explains kind of her lost nature and her anger is that as a child, a Cardassian forced her to watch her father get tortured to death, basically.
Was she talking to Picard or was she talking to Guinan? Picard, I think.
I can't remember. I just watched it yesterday and I can't remember.
Yeah, I know. We're so terrible.
Yeah, but it's such a kind of crazy story, and I think that again it does endear the audience. They do. You're right. It's like there's so much backstory and things like that
just so
fit
much
into
setup.
this one episode. It's true. It did feel like a two-parter.
This episode feels like it, in the modern era of movies. Sometimes we get movies that aren't just one movie. They try to set up so much more. They set up an entire cinematic universe. You know, whether they're good or bad. The Mummy 2017 tries to set up an entire cinematic universe. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice tries to set up an entire universe. A lot is on the shoulders of just one movie, just one script, and this kind of felt like the same thing to me. It kind of felt like, yeah, they were setting up almost this whole season of TNG, an entire series of Deep Space Nine, and they knew where they were going, and so they didn't base everything they did off this. They actually started it with this.
So yeah, in a way,
the writing is really good in this episode.
It is
honestly.
good, and like also just like it's cool that they're like going in this direction. I can't remember. I think Gene Roddenberry's dedication is on Unification Part 1 and 2, which is coming up. So he dies sometime around now, which means that Star Trek 6
comes out. Well, I did notice that he was still executive producer on this episode, I think.
Yeah, so but I mean, it's like it's almost like this is the season, and I keep thinking it was last season. I may have made that mistake a bunch of times, but I'm pretty sure the dedication comes. We'll find out when we get there, but I'm pretty sure the opening of Unification, it's dedicated to the memory of Gene Roddenberry. So somewhere between now and then, he passes away. But I can already see the shift in the tone of the show. I do think that's like this episode kind of marks like a grittier, darker view of the future. It's still very bright and bubbly and like optimistic,
especially TNG.
Yeah, TNG. But you can start to see like this kind of like almost like edginess coming into it. So
that is the modern era of television. Also, I mean, nowadays, pretty much every television series that exists tries to show us how good we can be as humans, but they do it in a way that is opposite to how Star Trek would literally show you the best humans doing the best things,
right?
And so they would kind of lead by example, whereas TV shows have a tendency nowadays to show us the worst of everything, and kind of it's more of like a critique, like, hey, look, this is how bad things can get.
But I mean, to use our show, The Expanse, as an example, things get so dark, but then you have like a little moment of, for lack of a better word, well, it's appropriate for The Expanse. You have a moment of humanity.
Yeah,
and
The Expanse is literally that. It's so good. It's an amazing Star Trek show.
Right?
I don't want to say that because I don't want to take away from The Expanse being its own thing and being unique.
Right.
But it does have that sense of every season, all of these characters that are separated eventually find a way together, come together and fight for the good of humanity against these things that are horrible, like these certain horrible people, these certain horrible events or whatever's happening. The Expanse is a bright light in today's television, honestly.
Yeah, I'm glad you turned me on to it. I finally went and just watched the whole thing. I'm obsessed with it.
You can't stop once you watched it. Once you start.
And I'm so grateful that Amazon has picked it up and that it's going to continue. The Expanse lives #, which is cool.
I'm a bad person because I was 50% hoping that someone was going to pick it up, and I was 50% hoping that it wasn't, because if it ended at the end of season 3, the season 3 finale is really good, and it finishes The Expanse quite well. If they were to stop it here, it would make sense. And sometimes my favorite shows become my least favorite shows as they drag on. Season 3 is the best thing ever made, but then after that, it's just the worst thing ever made. So I was kind of thinking, I hope that doesn't happen to The Expanse, but then they're basing their stories off the books, so I'm pretty confident that that won't happen.
I think that, yeah, I have a feeling that they're gonna end it like at some point intentionally. But what I like about The Expanse is that there seems to be a very close partnership with the authors of the book. They seem very involved, and I watched a couple of interviews with them, and the way that they talk about it is like they seem very satisfied, and like the changes that occur are changes that they're like, oh yeah, this makes more sense for the screen. It doesn't work on the books. And
well,
so
sometimes
it's like
you need to change things, don't you? Because it's a different
right,
format.
right. So I'm really impressed by the authors, and it seems like they're super involved with the day-to-day operation, and they like it. And so I think that's the recipe for success with a series like The Expanse, because you're going to have satisfaction from the people who love the books, and then people who are just coming to the show. It's like, it's riveting stuff. So it's like,
I will admit though that when it comes to Star Trek and especially Discovery, because that's being produced currently, I do look into everything that's going on behind the scenes, and I form my own opinions about what's happening, what decisions are being made. Whereas with The Expanse, I don't. I purposefully, consciously do not do that. I just sit back and watch the episodes as they're released, because I don't want to know anything about the rest. I just want to appreciate it as it comes out, because I think it's just.
And to be fair,
I have a different relationship with shows that I invest that much time in. Looking at the behind the scenes and stuff, and you kind of, I don't know, it takes away from just the joy of devouring the story.
And to be completely fair to Star Trek, The Expanse doesn't have the weight of like 50 years of canon on on it like Discovery does, and like
Absolutely.
so in a way you can just sit back and relax and enjoy what's coming next. Whereas with Star Trek Discovery, there's like this built-in anxiety of like, is this gonna be true to this?
What are they gonna do next?
Yeah, right? What are they gonna do next? And so it's like, that's something I think that, like, you overcome it if the story is really good, as we have done in not many, but in a few situations that that should have been, but you do overcome that anxiety or whatever. But for the most part, it is a plague, which is why I'm such a proponent of going forward. Just don't worry about anything. Just like do something in the future, like like make it new again.
I will say that Discovery isn't my favorite Star Trek show. Even if it was, just the fact that it's a prequel brings this inherent stress.
Yeah,
there's like an anxiety before you sit down and watch the episode. But maybe that's just because we're strange fans.
Well, no, I think anyone who's I think this, from what I've seen, and like the internet of course isn't like the greatest source of we're not sitting at the StarTrek.com level where we see they get everything. Like everyone focuses their entire attention on the Star Trek account, the official accounts. So like they know what the mood of the fans really truly is. But just from what I've been able to observe, anyone who's like invested in Star Trek in terms of like like loves it and has watched it and has like watched all the series, which I haven't even like, I'm not fully I haven't watched all of Voyager. That's going to be exciting, because I know you wag the finger at me, Starfleet boy, what's wrong with you? But but I'm getting there. But my point is that like folks like myself who have invested a lot, or those who've invested everything, like who've watched it all, like they read all the novels and things like that, it's got to be stressful watching a prequel, because it messes with so much that you're attached to, like in terms of like look and feel and everything. I think people who I find it interesting, just kind of as a commentary, I try to stay very like neutral in a lot of arguments as much as I can, even though sometimes I get dragged in. But I do think that the people who are upset at fans for being upset are wrong, but also fans who are upset are also wrong. so
You heard it here first, people. Starfleet boy thinks that everyone is wrong all the time.
All the time. I think it's.
There you go.
I
So
think that
whatever you're thinking right now, just stop thinking it.
I
It's wrong.
think the ultimate safe place to be is to remember that it's just a freaking TV show.
It is
like that, you know, I mean, like that's the safest place you can be for your own mental health and like for your own, you know, like just happiness in general, and not invest
So
too much of your.
you mustn't get frustrated by the fact that Bajorans don't all wear the earring on the same ear.
Exactly, or Bajora, and you know, like
Bajorans.
like TV shows do evolve as we're seeing this with the benefit of hindsight, you know.
The Trill go through a major redesign.
Right, the Trill, it's true. Well, and then I don't know if you had a chance, but in our discussion on Redemption, Humbert and I were talking about this. It's like there's a Romulan problem too. It's like the Romulans have gone through so many, but I
have no idea why no one talks about that.
No one.
That's what we were saying. Me the most. You see friggin' Spock on Romulus with his, you know, flat face, and everyone's got bulges on their eyebrows, and thinking, how does no one see that this guy is not a Romulan?
Right, and
he's got no ridges of lumps or anything.
I didn't even realize that. I can't wait to get to unification. I thought they did the prosthetics on Spock, but
no,
I guess
they didn't. They just left him as he was. I mean, come on, people.
Like, well, Spock is epic. I mean, like, you
open your eyes.
But anyways, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so we have the benefit of, you know, hindsight, and you can see TNG evolving right before your eyes. Like you can see when you look at it as a complete work, you see that from season 1 to season 5, totally different show, like in many ways, in many respects, like, you know,
down to the uniforms, right?
Yeah, even down to the uniforms. So shows are allowed to do that. So Discovery season 1 is not, that's why I'm like, it's not an end all for me. And I think you just posted on Twitter, I didn't have a chance to interact with it, but you even said, like, how would TNG have held up to today's scrutiny under social media and things like that, or, you know, or even DS9? And I haven't answered this question online yet, but I'm compelled to think that, like,
I'm pretty convinced TNG would have been cancelled.
Writers would have been fired, and like
I'm pretty sure TNG would have been cancelled because the first season is not good. Not only is it not good, but I mean, it's just, I don't know. In today's pressure, there would have been this movement to not watch it.
I hope CBS has a 3-season plan for Discovery to give it a shot, you know, to truly let it evolve into whatever it's going to become.
They just announced 4 new TV shows, a 5-year contract with Alex Kurtzman. Discovery worked very well for them.
So that's good.
Regardless of what we think, I think the numbers that they have are very promising.
And must justify all this, yeah.
That's why they greenlit a whole lot of stuff.
Awesome. Trek is back. I hope we don't get Trek fatigue.
Return to TNG. Oh, you can't do that to me. I won't get fatigue. Don't worry about it. I wanted to talk about the Starfleet uniform, by the way, because we just mentioned it. Mm-hmm. Is it hypocritical that in the beginning, Riker gets all mad about her earring, but doesn't get mad about Worf's sash?
It is 100% hypocritical.
Okay, so he's a racist.
Wow. I have to take my glasses off for that. No, Sean, I don't think he's a racist. But I do think he's unfair.
No, I think he's unfair. No, absolutely. He's not a racist. It's just that he wants to uphold, he has this thing about upholding standards. And I think he has this, he knows that Ensign Ro is not a very, you know.
I think by today's standards, Riker would be 100% considered a bro. I think he's just like, you know, one of those guys that like doesn't pay attention until, you know, he has to be told he's wrong, and then he admits it. You know, he's not introspective enough, I don't think, at this point to realize, oh yeah, like ahead of time to realize, oh wait, we let Worf wear his cultural.
It might just be that he doesn't
know.
actually notice that Worf has that simply because he's his friend, and so he doesn't really, I mean, I would assume that Picard or Riker take a close look at Ensign's uniforms as they pass through the hallway, just to see, like, are they wearing the proper dress code, But then when they're talking to Deanna, which is wearing like different pajamas every day,
yeah, by the way, she has
really...
the rank. She has a rank. She's ranked as a lieutenant commander.
Yeah.
Counselor Troy, and so, but she never wears the uniform or the pips or any. There's like no way you would ever know.
There's certain situations she does. Usually when the Enterprise is taken over by another captain or probably evil admiral,
it's gonna happen.
She comes up in a formal.
Yeah, it's true. But until now, it's gonna happen in this episode. I can't remember what his name, but I remember Captain Jellicoe takes over the Enterprise for a while, and he makes her wear the. There's
actually a mention of, like, get dressed.
Yeah, it's like really awesome.
Like, you're on my bridge. Get a uniform.
But then she wears the uniform from then on. I do remember the.
I would have straight up lied to the captain. I would have said, "But this is therapeutic. It's for my clients."
Showing my cleavage helps to put clients at ease. So
when there's an alien species on the view screen, give them a bit of that.
Oh boy, we're starting to descend into madness. I wonder if we have anything else to talk.
This is the end. I think we're turning into Drunk Space Nine at this point. So.
A little Gary action here.
Okay, but before we end this, I just wanted to say that every moment with Guinan was amazing. I love the way they write that character, and I love the way the dialogue she has is just amazing, and she delivers it. Whoopi Goldberg delivers it in such a way that, I don't know, every scene that Guinan is always fascinating to me, and I really love the beginning of a friendship between her and Ro. She's completely taken off guard. She doesn't know what's going on. What the hell is this character? Trying to be this person trying to be my friend. I've never seen her in my life. I'm not friends with anyone. I'm frustrated and angry, but she's always happy.
Yeah, it's true. But I think Guinan may have been like Ro at some point.
Maybe.
In her youth, and I think that's why because she calls her out on so many things, and she even says, I like the scene you referenced in 10 Forward where she's like, well, if you wanted to be alone, you wouldn't be here in a public place. And it's like, duh. It's true.
That psychoanalysis right there.
I think it's interesting that the show has two, like, Counselor Troy's role is shifting a little bit, I think, which is interesting because, like, I think it is weird to me that Guinan gets through to some characters, but it's natural. That's like a normal thing. Like, not everyone's going to go seek a counselor or a therapist.
That's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah. If Counselor Troy comes to see you, even if you don't go to her, but she comes to you, you kind of feel like there's a doctor prodding at you, because there's something wrong. Whereas when this creepo Guinan rolls up in 10 Forward, you're just kind of thinking, what does she want? And you don't really think about her as a doctor or as someone treating you, or, I mean, that's the way I see it. So it might be easier to open up to her for some people.
I agree. I'm going to go to Memory Alpha and read because the doctor's not here to read from Larry Nemechek's book, but Memory Alpha seems to have pretty much everything there. Oh, here's some Picard quotes. I understand you've been discussing alternative adversarial engagement strategy with Mr. Mott. It's like some of the lines are
I actually quoted something on my notes here because he says he's angry about the Admiral assigning Ro to his ship. Oh.
Yay!
He arrives.
He arrives just in time to read from the book.
Turn the tide, as they say. What episode are you guys talking about?
We're still on Ensign Ro.
Oh, Ensign Ro. Okay.
We're just wrapping up our discussion of Ensign Ro. we were gonna go to. I was gonna go to Memory Alpha to read from the digital version of the book, but
we have the physical copy right here.
The physical version just being bent. So.
There we go. Ensign Ro, let me look it up. We are in the
I was
fifth
just gonna say, I love how Picard's angry about how Ensign Ro has been assigned to his ship, but he actually says the flagship, my ship.
Right.
he makes a point of actually saying it's my ship.
My ship.
I don't want that bullshit on my ship. Can you imagine if Star Trek: The Next Generation had swearing?
Oh God.
So funny.
Okay, it says the episode's roots were simple. According to Rick Berman, it was specifically designed to introduce a sharp-edged character, an idea that had been floating around as far back as Wesley's departure a year earlier. The other characters in the cast are fairly homogeneous. Some might even say bland, Berman explained. So we wanted a character with the strength and dignity of a Starfleet officer, but with a troubled past and edge.
Yeah, well, I mean that goes back to what we were saying before. We were talking about how Ensign Ro adds some contrast to how everyone is so perfect on the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true, and that's what made her such. I think what made her such a popular character, and I mean, I remember I loved the episode back when I first watched it. Back in the day. I haven't seen it since, really. Maybe reruns occasionally way back when, but I haven't watched it. I didn't watch it for this discussion. I didn't think I was going to be on, but I remember I vividly remember that the Ensign Ro was a character that we all liked and we all thought would make a great addition to the show. But of course, I also remember that we didn't know if she was going to be an ongoing character because, we've had Barclay introduced, and he only makes those, once a year appearances.
Yeah, she's actually on 9 episodes of TNG.
Right, total. Right. So she did achieve like sort of a reoccurring, kind of like Guinan, a reoccurring a spot on the show. I'm curious to know why she just wasn't outright added to the cast. To be, I don't know if it had to do with maybe commitments to another show, because Michelle Forbes was on Homicide, Life on the Streets. I don't know if any of you have seen that show.
No, but I remember now that she was on Homicide though. Yeah, we were talking about how she might have been Kira on DS9.
She was, yes, I believe she was offered. Ro was going to be the Kira character, and Michelle Forbes said no.
In the original story, it was the Romulans who were occupying Bajor, but Rick Berman felt the Romulans had seen too much, and remembering the wounded had the story changed to include the Cardassians. So I think that's interesting how you think there's not enough Romulans, but Rick Berman thought there were too many Romulans.
Really? He said that?
Yeah, too much Romulans. Yeah.
Too much Romulans.
It says here, we talked about this during our discussion, Doctor. But here's something interesting. So Berman emphasized the Bajorans were not modeled on any one real-life group. The Kurds, the Palestinians, the Jews in the 40s, the boat people from Haiti. Unfortunately, the homeless and terrorism are problems in every in a bunch of these groups. So I think that we kind of came to that conclusion on our own too, that it's not one specific thing, but that it does remind you of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
I can't believe that it looks to me, based on what we're seeing here, that the show was filmed and this episode was filmed in 2 days, which is pretty crazy. But I guess that makes sense. They did have some on-location stuff, which was exciting.
Yeah, I just want to say that wasn't poor enough to me. The way they explained that these Bajorans are living in extreme poverty and they're struggling and what have you. You understand that with the story, but the sets and the props and the costumes that they were wearing didn't seem I don't know, poor enough,
impoverished enough.
Yeah. To me, it did. They didn't feel like they were wearing tattered rags or anything. It just felt like, you know, the regular old TNG uniforms, or the regular old TNG or onesies that they put on every alien species. And yeah, I mean, yeah, as they do with TNG, they throw a bit of hay around, and then a bit of dust, and then that's how it's impoverished. But I don't know. I feel they could have done something more with that. But then maybe it is just time, budget.
The Memory Alpha confirms that this was the first appearance of the Barber Mott, specifically of Mott, not Bolians, but that.
Oh.
Continuity. I always love this part. Commander Riker orders Ro to comply with Starfleet uniform regulations when she beams aboard the Enterprise D by making her remove her traditional Bajoran earrings. This seems like a strange request, as Worf, we just talked about, this is allowed to wear his Klingon baldric.
Well, I think that's something that must frustrate people.
And Deanna Troi is allowed to not wear a standard uniform at all. However, given Riker's clear misgivings in regards to Ensign Ro serving on the Enterprise and the statement that I intend to demand the highest level of performance from her, it would seem that adherence to Starfleet uniform code is somewhat at the discretion of one's commanding officer, and Riker simply chose to give her no leeway in the matter. Because, yeah, at the end, Picard just says, like, he's like, ha, 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 you can wear your earrings all you want. I like them. May I try them on, Ensign Ro?
Oh, God.
You know, that's an interesting... I of course, I didn't watch it, so I didn't know that there was a scene like that. I didn't recall that. But, you know, even on the original show, Uhura had some really big earrings sometimes. I mean, are those fall under code? I mean... I didn't know there was a thing on earrings. I think maybe that just reflects the...
Are you remembering earrings on Uhura, or are you thinking of her, like, gigantic...
No, remember, she would have, like, really...
Oh, hoop earrings. You're right. She did have the, like, the big earrings.
I think that's some shit. Like, some captains would probably leave their senior staff alone when it comes to that kind of stuff, as long as it doesn't interfere with your job. Just, like, do whatever you want, your senior staff.
Right.
While you're still climbing the ranks, maybe you want to, you know, keep it like good, or keep I don't know how to say this, but stick to the rules. But once you're senior staff,
that makes sense. Ensign Ro demonstrates the versatility of the Starfleet uniform and its fabric by taking off her standard duty uniform Type B, which visibly has no opening or zippers at the front, to comfort the young girl when around the you know, that in that one scene on the camp, the jacket is open in the front in that scene, which is funny. So I guess it's like all magnetic or something like that. It's some super future fabric. And she also wears just the undershirt in that scene. If there's anything else interesting, Kennelly states that the occupation of Bajor, which like many other things had not been well developed at this point, has lasted 40 years. Later reference conflict with one another in Kennelly's claim, but the generally accepted canonical figure is 50 years.
Okay.
And let's see. They had stock footage of Starbase 74. And then this marks the final appearance of the Cardassian Type C uniforms first seen in The Wounded. But they didn't have their little virtual reality goggles. Michael Piller felt that the introduction of Ro was a success. It's one of the season's greatest accomplishments, not just by Rick and I, but by the acting of Michelle, who was just wonderful performance, et cetera, et cetera. I agree. I remember we were excited about Ensign Ro when she first came. She kind of shook things up in a great way, and we talked about that on this discussion as well. And to your earlier point, Sean, Michael Piller credits the success as due to the use of Guinan. I think Guinan embraces Ro in a very personal way. She basically took Ro by the hand and said she deserves your attention and deserves to be embraced by you when she took Ro to see Captain Picard. So it's
cool. we the audience are very much Captain Picard because we always tend to agree with his speeches. We tend to back his decisions, and so we tend to not really like Ro as she comes on the ship. Guinan taking Ro to Captain Picard and saying, "Look, she's my friend. This is how she is." She embraces her. It kind of helps us embrace the character as well.
Oh, this is interesting here. So I caught a reference, Humbert, in this episode where Guinan talks about how a long time ago I was in trouble and I still would be in that trouble if it weren't for this one man. And I thought it was a reference to Time's Arrow, which it is, but there's some apocrypha listed here on Memory Alpha. It says Guinan tells Ro that a very long time ago I got into some serious trouble too, and I mean serious, and I'd probably still be there if I hadn't trusted one man. The Star Trek Stargazer novel Oblivion shows the backstory for the friendship of Picard and Guinan, including how Picard helped save Guinan. However, Guinan may have been referring to the events of Time's Arrow Part 2.
Considering the books, considering the books are like not canon,
right? We go by.
The book probably wasn't written at that time. I'm pretty sure they were referencing Time's Arrow.
Well, that's all I got for Ensign Ro. Anything else? Anything you want to add, Doctor? And anything else you want to add, Sean?
Nope.
We come down to the ratings. I'm going to go first.
Okay.
So there's no dispute or question. I'm going to stick to what I had in my mind, and I think this discussion only solidified it for me because I'm still pretty jazzed and amped about it. So I'm going to give this episode a 10. I think it's a top episode because it establishes so much. I think because this is like the genesis of Deep Space Nine and like this whole story, and I really love the Bajoran story, and so I think Ensign Ro is an awesome example of Star Trek doing things that are like, you know, bigger than it's just a TV show in a sense, you know, like it opened the world up in this episode, and I like that.
Wow. So is it me or is it you?
Well, I didn't watch. I don't feel qualified for this discussion because I didn't watch it recently.
Based on your memory, though, I think you said you might have given it an 8.
I think Sean should go first because he actually watched it. Mine should just be sort of an amendum,
like an amended. Okay.
Well, I give it a 7. I give it a 7. Yeah, it's good. It does set up a lot of things, but then there's certain issues that I have with the episode just in itself, as usual. So yeah.
Do you want to like recap those issues? I know you went over them, but
oh yeah, okay. So the way that the sets and the props on the planet were. What else did I have? I don't even know what they were anymore. Yeah, like okay. So how most of the secondary characters are a little two-dimensional.
And the Admiral, the Admiral especially. The Admiral is
he's like classic Admiral villain. That I'm pretty sure you would have guessed the moment he came on. Like, this is the first time you've seen the episode on TV. The Admiral comes in, you're already convinced that he's the bad guy, or that he's the guy doing the bad thing. Because he's not necessarily a villain or an antagonist. He's just embroiled in some... Yeah, that's it.
Or as Picard calls him, naive, or it's just a nicer way of saying idiot. You naive piece of shish kebab.
And I think some of the pacing is just a little off in some moments as well. Yeah.
Cool. All right, your little side note rating based on your memory, Doctor.
Sean is correct. It is a 7. The answer
it is a 7.
Yes, it is a 7.
Team 7.
Team 7. No, I mean, I think, for me at 10, it has. I mean, there are very few 10s. But well, you know, the best of both worlds is a 10. For sure.
Not for Sean.
Not for Sean. Really?
Sean's highest rating tends to be a 9. I can't recall.
Wow.
I gave
standards.
I gave a 9.5 to season 4, episode 15, whatever that was.
Oh, you actually have it documented. That's cool.
Wow. See,
Yeah,
he keeps track.
I keep track of what I say.
Look at
We
that.
need a database.
First contact is the episode
Oh yeah,
where
you really
where
love that
Riker's on the
episode. That's
planet.
right. Yeah, it's true. All right, cool. Well, that wraps up our discussion for Ensign Ro. Audience, we would love to know what you think, so please share your thoughts in the comment section below, or send us an email, or engage with us on Twitter, or engage with us on Instagram. We have a Facebook page. I try to answer there, so if you want to find Starfleet Boy on Facebook, feel free to go there. Also, check out Sean's channel, Trek on the Tube. The Doctor is exclusive to Starfleet Boys, so you can only find him here. So if you want more of the Doctor, just go back and watch some older episodes of Starfleet Boy. And
be sure to watch the episodes until the end, because he might appear.
He might appear just like on this one. Yeah,
special cameo appearances. Yeah,
cameo appearances. All right, so that's all she's got. Live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.